Molly Brooks Murray and her co-conspirator were sentenced to lengthy prison terms for their roles in the conspiracy. But legal experts noted that their sentences, while substantial, could never truly account for the psychological damage inflicted on two children who had been betrayed by the person who should have protected them most. The children themselves began the long process of recovery, with specialized counselors trained in helping young victims of trauma and trafficking. Medical examinations confirmed that while they had been physically neglected, they had not been sexually abused, a small mercy in a case filled with horrors. But perhaps the most important part of their recovery was simply being home, being surrounded by family members who had never stopped fighting for them, being in familiar places where they could begin to feel safe again. The case changed how missing children investigations are conducted across Canada. The Sullivan case demonstrated that not all disappearances involve strangers or random violence. Sometimes the greatest danger comes from within the family itself, disguised as love and concern. New protocols were established for evaluating family members during missing persons investigations. Training programs were developed to help investigators recognize the signs of performative grief. And most importantly, resources were allocated to combat child trafficking networks that prey on vulnerable families. But for the community of Pictou County, for the volunteers who had searched tirelessly through the woods, for the investigators who had refused to give up, the most important outcome was simple. Lilly and Jack Sullivan were home. Today, as I finish telling you this story, those children are working with counselors, playing with toys they hadn't seen in months, and slowly learning to trust that they are truly safe. They face a long journey of healing, but they are facing it surrounded by love and protection. The pink blanket that started this investigation, torn in half and used to create a false trail, has been returned to Lilly. She sleeps with it every night now, a comfort object that survived the same nightmare she did and came home with her. The case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan reminds us that evil can hide behind the most convincing facades, that the people we trust most can sometimes be the most dangerous, and that the performance of innocence can mask the darkest intentions. But it also reminds us that truth has a way of surfacing, that justice can prevail against even the most calculated deceptions, and that sometimes, against all odds, the stories that seem hopeless can have endings filled with hope. Thank you for following Lilly and Jack's story to the end. If this case moved you, hit like and subscribe. We have more stories that deserve to be heard. Stories of children who need advocates, families who need support, and communities that refuse to give up hope. Share your thoughts, your feelings, and your final reflections in the comments below. And remember that somewhere tonight, Lilly and Jack Sullivan are sleeping safely in their own beds, surrounded by the love of family members who never gave up hope. But the story doesn't truly end here. Because while Lilly and Jack are home, their journey of healing has only just begun. The psychological scars left by months of manipulation, fear, and separation from everything familiar don't disappear overnight. Child psychologists working with the Sullivan children describe a complex road ahead, one filled with small victories and unexpected setbacks. Lilly, now 7, still wakes up some nights asking if she's really home. The concept of permanence, of safety, was so thoroughly shattered during her ordeal that rebuilding it requires daily reinforcement. She carries that pink blanket everywhere, not just at bedtime, but to breakfast, to therapy sessions, even to the backyard when she plays. It's become more than a comfort object. It's proof that she survived something terrible and came out the other side. Jack, barely 5 years old, has fewer conscious memories of their time away, but his behavior tells the story his words cannot. He refuses to leave his grandmother's sight, clinging to her leg during conversations, sleeping on a mattress beside her bed. His laughter, when it comes, sounds different than before, more precious because of how hard-won it is. The investigation files remain active, though the primary case has been resolved. Authorities continue tracking down every connection in the trafficking network that almost claimed these children. What they've discovered is chilling. Lilly and Jack were just 2 of dozens of children targeted by this operation across multiple countries. If this case has affected you the way it's affected millions of others who followed their story, consider subscribing to stay updated on similar cases where your awareness could make a difference. Because somewhere out there, Other families are facing their own nightmares, and public attention can mean the difference between resolution and eternal uncertainty. The Pictou County community that mobilized to search for these children hasn't forgotten the lessons learned during those desperate weeks. The volunteer search protocols developed during the Sullivan case have been adopted by communities across Canada. The fundraising systems established to support the investigation continue operating, now focused on helping other families facing similar crises. Detective Sarah McDonald, who led the investigation from day one, keeps a photo of the children's reunion on her desk. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of why she does this work. Most missing children cases don't end like this, she admits. But this one did, and that has to count for something. That has to give other families hope. The legal proceedings against Molly Brooks Murray and her co-conspirator are ongoing, with additional charges likely as investigators continue unraveling the full scope of their crimes. Legal experts predict lengthy sentences, but as prosecutor James Morrison noted during preliminary hearings, no sentence can undo what these children experienced. The best we can hope for is justice and the assurance that these particular criminals can never harm another child. Belinda Gray, the grandmother whose advocacy kept this case in the public eye, has become an unofficial spokesperson for families dealing with missing children cases. Her testimony before parliamentary committees on child protection has led to proposed changes in how Amber Alerts are issued and how family members are evaluated during investigations. "I learned that the system isn't perfect," she told a packed hearing room in Ottawa. "But I also learned that it works when people refuse to give up. When communities come together. When strangers care enough to keep searching, keep asking questions, keep demanding answers." The media coverage that initially seemed to hinder the investigation ultimately played a crucial role in its resolution. The constant public attention made it impossible for the trafficking network to operate normally, forcing mistakes that led to evidence and eventually to the children's rescue. But beyond the investigative successes and legal victories, the most important outcome remains personal. 2 children who were stolen from their family are learning to be children again. Lilly has started drawing pictures of the Coast Guard rescue, remarkably detailed illustrations for a 6-year-old, showing boats and helicopters and people wearing official uniforms. Her therapist sees this as positive processing, a way of taking control of traumatic memories by putting them on paper where they can be contained and examined safely. Jack's healing shows in different ways. He's begun speaking in full sentences again, asking questions about everyday things, showing interest in toys and books that had been forgotten during the months of uncertainty. His appetite has returned, along with the stubborn independence that worried his family before the disappearance, but now fills them with relief. The pink blanket that became a symbol of this case, torn apart to create false evidence, then reunited with its owner, represents something larger than a child's comfort object. It represents the possibility of healing, of putting pieces back together, of finding wholeness after devastating loss. For true crime followers who've invested emotionally in this story, the successful resolution offers something rare, proof that sometimes the worst-case scenarios don't come to pass. Sometimes children do come home. Sometimes justice does prevail. Sometimes the people who refuse to give up hope are proven right. The Sullivan case will be studied in law enforcement academies, analyzed in psychological journals, and referenced in policy discussions about child protection. But for the people who lived through it, the family members, the investigators, the volunteers, the community members who prayed and searched and refused to accept the worst, it will always be remembered as the case where love conquered evil. If you've followed this story from the beginning, you've witnessed one of the most complex missing children investigations in Canadian history. You've seen how quickly a family's world can shatter, how evil can hide behind familiar faces, and how the determination of ordinary people can achieve extraordinary results. The comment section is filled with people sharing their own connections to this case, parents holding their children a little tighter, community members organizing local safety initiatives, investigators inspired to pursue difficult cases with renewed determination. That's the real legacy of Lilly and Jack's story, not just their individual rescue, but the ripple effect of hope and action their case created. As we close this final chapter, remember that true crime isn't just about the crimes themselves, It's about the people who refuse to let evil win. It's about communities that mobilize when their most vulnerable members are threatened. It's about investigators who work 18-hour days because someone's child is missing. It's about family members who never stop believing, never stop fighting, never stop hoping. Thank you for following Lilly and Jack Sullivan's story to the end. If this case moved you, hit like and subscribe. We have more stories that deserve to be heard. Stories of children who need advocates, families who need support, and communities that refuse to give up hope. Share your thoughts, your feelings, and your final reflections in the comments below. And remember that somewhere tonight, Lilly and Jack Sullivan are sleeping safely in their grandmother's house, surrounded by the love that brought them home. The nightmare is over. The healing has begun. And two children who were once lost have found their way back to where they belong.